This is all a true story, and the only thing I will be changing in this is the names of the people involved. Also, please do not do this unless you absolutely feel it's necessary. Everyone has their own way of healing, and every situation is different. I will be making updates as I get more information. I'm one of the lucky ones who has had a young life filled with sexual trauma that was still able to find a great man, get married and start a family. However, I would always live in fear. For 2 years my rapist was in prison for God knows what, but I didn't have to worry about him. But during the summer he got out. He still lives in my hometown where I frequent often. I turned him in, but I never pressed charges because I didn't want to ruin his life, like I felt that he had mine at the time. So I keep updates on him just to make sure he's away from me, and every time he's not in jail or prison, I live in constant fear of running into Tom at Kroger. I know he has no power and he can't do anything to me anymore, but a fear is a fear, and for me it's irrational. In October I kept thinking of what it was that I needed to heal. I wanted to stop living in fear. I don't want to go back to the police station and have them dig out my police report, if they still even had it. 6 years ago I was going to therapy because I was suicidal, depressed, and was self-harming for obvious reasons. Then one day I told. When I told her, she made me either file a report or she was calling Child Protective Services due to my age. That was the last time I saw her again. One night I was just laying there and I decided to write him a message from where it all started. Dear Tom, in January of 2014, I filed a police report at the police station. For some ungodly reason, I convinced my mum not to press charges against you because I didn't want to ruin your life. Though I see you're doing a good enough job at it yourself. What led me to filing a police report was that you came up in conversation while I was in therapy. Not only were you an adult during our relationship, but you also knew that I was too afraid of you to say no. You abused me mentally as well as physically the entire time spans of my 8th grade year to freshman year of high school. You are a predator, and I really hope you did not rape or mentally harm any other underage girls. I hope you can now take responsibility for your actions. I blamed myself for a long time afterwards when I was a child. You can't even argue that I wasn't afraid of you, because you, on multiple occasions, threatened to lay your hands on a child, whether it was to rearrange my face or rip all of my piercings out one by one. You are a monster and you don't deserve happiness. His response to this was just a thumbs up. For a little while I felt free. However, that feeling soon disappeared because I found out that he'd moved back to our hometown from Texas. I needed to be free, but I didn't want my name to be the reason his child hated him. So one day I was checking his Facebook, and I saw that his father had commented on one of his statuses, expressing that he needed to get some help and other things that really stood out to me in a good way. Prior to this, I'd written his mum multiple letters, and I always ripped them up. I was finally ready to tell the truth. I will insert the message, and yes, I know writing in third person is cheesy. I'm a cheesy person. Hello. At the end of 2010, Tom met a young girl at the bowling alley with her sister. He added her on Facebook and began giving her attention. She was 14. He then had turned 18 in the beginning of 2011. He started grooming her and made her think they were in a relationship, but had her not tell anyone. When he went to jail that summer, he even had her walk down to his house on Channel Street to give Krista letters for him. She was still 14. After he got out of jail, he continued to talk to her, but became verbally abusive, so she became afraid of him. He talked her into letting him come over in the middle of the night in September of 2011, when she'd just turned 15. She was afraid of him, but still let him in because she was a child. He got her to do what he wanted because she was afraid of her parents finding out that she'd let him in. Thankfully the bed was loud, so he stopped, and afterwards he continued to send her threats, saying that if she were pregnant he would get his friends to beat her up so she would miscarry. He also threatened to rearrange her face, as well as rip out her piercings. In 2014 she spoke about everything in therapy, and due to being a minor she had to turn him in. Her and her mum went to the police station and decided not to press charges. That girl is me. My maiden name was Evans, and I am not going to revoke my decision not to press charges. However, I want someone to know what he did to me. I don't need a response or for you to message me back. I just want you to know the truth. He groomed and raped me. I'm sure that he did it to other young girls as well. Even if the lines were blurred consent-wise due to fear, it was still statutory. I need someone to know what he did to me. I reached out confronting him in October, and I know he doesn't care. There's no reason for me to press charges because I do wish him the best, and I hope he turns his life around. I'll send you the message that I sent him, that way you know I'm not being nasty. Also, I really hope his mum did not know my age. His father read it and then took a few hours to respond. When he did, I was only met with love and kindness. Tom's father was a truck driver, so he wasn't around a lot. However, Tom's father is now taking a stand for me. The morning he responded, Tom broke into his mother's house and held a knife to his own throat, then ran from the cops. He also may be charged with a stabbing that happened a few months ago, so he could be facing 20 years in prison. Tom's father also wants him to write me an apology letter, but I probably won't read it. I have scars all over my body from how badly he made me hurt myself. Maybe he will even make Tom turn himself in and confess. Only time will tell. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are ever too afraid to turn in your rapist, or even if you feel like me and you cannot live with the guilt, the universe will take care of you. I lived in a not-so-nice neighbourhood in southwest Detroit. In autumn of 2018, I broke my left foot and it required surgery, so while I was recovering from my surgery, I was staying with family. After the first few days, I drove home to gather some clothes and planned on staying there, then driving back to my family's house the next day. I was on crutches as I entered my house, and I was simultaneously talking with a friend that had called moments before I'd gotten to my door. I really needed to pee, and with the phone nestled between my ear and shoulder, I struggled through my bungalow to the rear of the house. With me talking and the noise of the crutches, I thought I was hearing noises from my attic, but it wasn't until I got into my bathroom and stopped that I was sure someone or something was upstairs. I said to my friend something along the lines of, "Hang on a second, there's something upstairs." The initial split-second thought was that there was an animal in the house, but no sooner had I said that, there was the loudest boom from what seemed to be directly above me. It sounded like the weight of a full-grown man. The attic was one of those that could have been converted into a bedroom and went the full length of the house. I'm 6 foot tall and I could stand upright if I was in the middle. My friend was immediately concerned and surprised and asked what it was. She thought I had fallen, but I immediately assured her that no, someone had broken in and they're upstairs. I book it out from the back and to the front door, on crutches no less, and I'm waiting for someone to come busting out of my house from somewhere. I put the phone back to my ear and told my friend I would call back because I needed to call another friend who lives nearby. But there was no answer. Not even 60 seconds after my exit from the house, no bullshit, a police cruiser turned out of the alley onto my block. I could see them and they could see me, so I waved them down. These weren't typical police officers. Like I said, not the greatest area. It was an unmarked police car with plainclothes officers. A gang unit car, or here in the D they're called the Jump Out Boys. I explained to them what had just happened, on how I came home and that I think someone is in my house. This is all now maybe 3 or 4 minutes from the time I arrived. So the 4 policemen with weapons drawn walked through my house with me in tow. When they got to the stairs, they called out, "Detroit Police," several times, then headed up the stairs. I waited at the bottom, and in 1 minute or so they make their descent. They tell me there's nothing, nobody's there, and as quickly as they entered, they made their exit. I thanked them and they drove away. Now, almost 8 minutes have lapsed and there I am, wondering what the hell was going on. I was standing very close to the door of my front room, trying to digest everything and wondering what I had heard. Maybe 20 seconds went by, and I was just standing silently with my ear turned up to the roof of my house, when suddenly I heard what started almost like a dragging sound, beginning at the rear of my house and growing louder as it got closer to the front. No sooner as it's right above me, I heard the loudest crash, as if it was trying to come right through the floor that separated me from it. I noped right the fuck out and sped away to my family's place. About 5 days later I returned and was so anxious about being there, but nothing ever happened, and slowly, living there went back to normal. If anyone has ever heard of something like this or knows what I might have experienced, I'd really appreciate your thoughts. Thanks. I am a person who has been able to feel and see spirits my entire life. Since I've gotten older though, I don't see spirits as often as I did as a child. My husband and I decided to start looking for a new home, since our family was getting smaller with my older children heading out to live on their own. We found a house that I absolutely fell in love with right away. When we went to view it, I could feel a male presence when I entered one of the bedrooms. I didn't feel that it was a malevolent spirit, so we decided to buy the house. Everything was great and I loved our new home. I still felt this presence all the time, but I didn't feel scared. The first encounter with the shadow man was with my youngest son, who was 5 at the time. He slept in the bedroom with my husband and I that night. My husband goes off to work at around 7:30 in the morning, so he's usually up pretty early. That morning my son jumped straight up in bed and asked me, "Mummy, who is that man?" He was pointing at the doorway to our bedroom and was gripping my arm, just staring. I thought maybe he was just still half asleep or had seen my husband walk past as it was 7 a.m. "Maybe you just saw Daddy," I replied. He just shook his head to say no and continued to stare at the door. I started to feel the presence again, so I asked my son, "Is he still there?" My son then shook his head to say yes and grips me a little tighter. Just then my husband walked into our bedroom. I asked again if he could still see the man and he answered, "No, he flew away like a bird when Daddy came in." The second time we saw it was when I was sitting in the living room playing on my phone and I could feel someone staring at me. I turned my head quickly and caught a glimpse of him. You should never show spirits any fear, so I yelled at him to leave because this is our home now and he is not welcome. It was quiet after that and I didn't feel him anymore. My older daughter ended up coming home for spring break and she told me that she'd kept hearing noises in her closet and in the wall. Her room is where I could feel his presence the most, so I just told her to pray and know that she is protected. After that I started having terrible nightmares about an evil woman with white hair. It was almost like sleep paralysis. I would try my hardest to pray her away, but I could never get the words out. My husband would often try to wake me up because I was talking in my sleep and shaking. I never mentioned the woman to anyone. I would just say I was having frequent nightmares. My daughter ended up moving home because she'd had an issue with her roommate, and about a week into her being home with us, she came to me crying, saying she keeps seeing this witch with white hair in her dreams. She said the woman would try to choke her. I didn't know what else to suggest other than for her to keep praying. I didn't want to scare her more by mentioning that the woman visits me in my dreams too, so I just kept it a secret. Like I mentioned before, my 5-year-old would often try to come and sleep with my husband and I, though we were trying to break that habit. One night I could feel someone sit on my bed. Expecting it to be my son, I turned over and said, "What's wrong, my little angel?" Opening my eyes, instead of seeing my son, I see the old woman sitting there staring at me with a menacing grin. I rubbed my eyes to focus, thinking I'm just seeing things, but when I opened my eyes again, she was still there. My heart just about jumped out of my chest, but I showed no fear and yelled out to her, "Bitch, didn't I tell you you're not welcome here? Get out now." I turned my back to her and prayed to God that my words worked. A few seconds passed and I said a prayer and turned to see if she had gone. She had. I prayed over the whole house and opened the windows and doors and told any spirit that was in there that they were not welcome and must leave. I haven't had the nightmares since, and neither has my daughter. I still feel the shadow man in here, but I think maybe he's here to protect us. Or at least I'd like to think so. I'm wondering if anyone has had a similar experience or knows what this is, because this thing was a huge part of my life growing up. For years I felt crazy and just accepted I was just seeing things, until I came across a few people who have seen similar things to me. I was a very anxious kid, the oldest of 3, and I had a really unhealthy and unhappy family dynamic up until I moved out. Every night this heavy sense of dread would fall over the house, and I would have big problems sleeping. When I eventually did fall asleep, it would be restless and full of nightmares and sleep paralysis, which I still get frequently. I don't want to rule out serious anxiety as a contributing factor too. When I hit about 11 to 12 years old, I started waking up at about 3 a.m. every single night, thinking the room had suddenly lit up in a bright flash. I just passed it off as a car passing by and the headlights shining in through the window. After a couple of months, I was still waking up at 3 a.m., but before the white flash. It was like jagged lightning, blinding white, streaking across the ceiling, and would light the whole room up and make me see spots. It used to terrify me. And there was also a heavy feeling of dread and fear building up when it would happen, so I used to just lie as still as I could and try to sleep, or at least pretend to. This went on for years. I never got to a point either where it didn't scare me, but I kind of got used to it. I even named the thing. One day when I was 16, my mother came to look in my room because she was getting pretty tired of me being tired and angsty all the time. It's a really small box room, so it didn't take long, and there was absolutely nothing there. She went to take a shower, and I was alone in the hallway with the dread feeling building up again. I decided to just go into my room because it was daylight, so what could happen? I walked in. I froze. Everything went completely silent, and the white light exploded from nothing in the middle of my room in front of my face, and it was way brighter than the light in the room already. It had also branched out more than I'd ever seen it before. Kind of like big fingers of lightning. It surrounded me for a second, then retracted back into the shape it had come from. Needless to say, I lost my shit and had a Blair Witch Project level freakout with snot and everything. My mum and I went for a drive after that, and I haven't seen the light that big since in my house, but sometimes I catch a little flash here and there. Very rarely though. About a year ago at the bar I work in, we were exchanging a few stories over drinks after hours. I told this story and one of my colleagues told me that it was called house lightning, and it's a common thing in Latvia where she's from. My boss also said that he'd seen the same flash more or less in a forest a few decades ago, which incidentally is just across the road from where I grew up. Has anyone seen anything similar or know what it could be? I completely accept the possibility it could have been a psychological thing, but I'm curious since other people have seen it too, and I haven't been able to find anything about it. To fully understand this story and my theory, you need some background information. In 2017, there was a shootout in my neighbourhood between the cops and a man who I believe was committing suicide by cop. My mum was the manager for the owner of the apartments, so she knew everything that had happened. She told me that the guy was a veteran who had been hit by a truck and had become addicted to his painkillers because of it. His doctor stopped prescriptions when he found out, and when he'd realised he had done this and would have to live with the pain, he then went on to try and commit suicide by having the cops shoot him. But the guy was paranoid and wouldn't come out of the apartment, so it turned into this long thing until he was killed at 4 a.m. Going back to how my mum was a manager and knew almost everything in that apartment complex, she tried to call him and help calm him down. Only he responded with a threat that chilled my very core. If you don't shut up with your Christian crap, I'll shoot up your apartment. I have the guns to do it too. After that call, my mother told the police, because she had me and my siblings there. There was also another family living there at the time. I was 16 when this happened, and my stepdad wasn't there, so I felt really scared. I remember one of the daughters saw me crying, and I wanted to say, "You try having your family threatened." But I didn't. It wouldn't have helped. And my room was up in the front of the house, so because of the threat, everyone was ordered to stay in the back 2 rooms, my mum's and my brother's. I ended up passing out around 3 a.m, and when I woke up at noon the next day, it all felt like a horrible dream, until I realised a bullet had come through our front window, bounced off the corner of my door and hit my bedroom mirror. We never found the bullet shell, not even when we moved, and the room was emptied. I used to face the window because my sister didn't like the feeling of me facing her as she slept, so I usually gave in, since she was my little sister. And after this shootout incident, I saw a man with red eyes and dark hair. I had never seen this man before, but I had a gut feeling that he had been the shooter. I prayed to God for protection until I passed out. I'd literally kept repeating my prayers for protection. The neighbourhood was never the same after that. It changed immensely. Before, children were free to come out and play around the neighbourhood until dark. Occasionally a drug dealer would move in, and there would be less kids about, but that never lasted long as they were evicted or caught pretty quickly. Either way, they left. But even years later, it still had that eerie ghost town feeling. Nowadays, sometimes kids can be seen playing outside, but an adult is always close by or they are on the porch. Another important note is that there was another family that we were really close with. We were always over at each other's houses, and even to this day we're still close. I am a medium, and I can sense energies and sometimes see entities. Skip to late March 2019. I had just turned 18, and we had a family friend from our old apartments. We'll call her Jackie, her son Timmy and her husband Luke. Luke was away on business, and Jackie needed a reliable babysitter or nanny. At the time I was Timmy's babysitter, but my mum had to give me rides to and from the job, and she was usually late. At the time, my mother and I were on a rocky path, so I told her that I would just be his nanny, as she knew the situation I had at home, so she agreed and said I could stay as long as I wanted. It was great. I finally had my own space and room, and I was on my own and felt like I could breathe. But I wouldn't be staying much longer than I had to. When it was just Jackie, Timmy and I was never really home alone, and I did have a couple of odd experiences. My room was in the very back that was closest to my old apartment, and the shooter's as well. I was once changing out of my hoodie and was just pulling it over my chest when I felt like I could see an old man staring at me. The scariest part was it wasn't from outside of my window, but inside the room with me. I will always remember his face. He had a pale face, a blank expression. His eyes were black pits, and instead of having a bunch of wrinkles, he had cracks in his skin. Then when I was in the shower, it'd feel like hands would reach through the shower curtain. When I'd take a bath and sink under the water, I'd feel like a man would lean over me with his hands behind his back. He felt different from the first man, but related. Other than those few times, I felt fine in the house. I even told Jackie about it. Once Luke came back, I wasn't ready to go home yet, so I slept on their couch and was pretty much a live-in babysitter. One night all three of them went to see Jackie's mother in a nursing home. It was the first night I had been home alone, and the living room had always felt safe in Jackie's house. We don't know why, but it just doesn't happen in that room. But since I was sleeping on the couch, I spent most of my time in the living room. I was watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch and had to go to the bathroom. Here's a quick description of the 3-bedroom style apartment. There's the living room and one bedroom connected to that. Then there's a wall separating the living room from the kitchen, then a hallway with the bathroom and 2 back bedrooms. The bathroom was the first door after the kitchen, which was connected to the closet of my room. Walking to the bathroom, I kept feeling like something was going to jump out at me. It felt like it would be like a little demonic creature or some evil-looking creature. I told myself I was just on edge because it was late and I was alone watching Sabrina in a neighbourhood that no longer felt safe. But it wasn't just that. As I was in the bathroom, I heard a growl from the closet behind me. They had no pets and it felt so dark. I was immediately terrified, and I ran out of the living room. I wouldn't stop staring at the hallway as I called my best friend. I told her what had happened and that I was coming over. I tried to go back to grab my shoes, but as soon as I did, I walked into the hallway. I felt extremely unwelcome. I was fortunate enough to have my money in my jeans, so I called a cab and waited outside. I was sobbing at this point. A lady saw me and came up to ask if I was okay. All I could mutter was, "Don't go in that house." Soon after, the cab pulled up. I thought it was mine, so I walked up, only to see it was Jackie and her family. Immediately she asked what was wrong. I just said I had to get out of the house, and I would be at my friend's. During the cab ride, I was crying and barefoot. The man thought he was saving me from an abusive situation, but I told him that I was fine and everything was okay. I didn't say anything else, and that guy also scammed me out of $13. Usually it was just $7, but I only had 20, so I asked if he had change. He said no, but we could stop at a Circle K so I could get some. I told him no, I just wanted to get to my friend's. Plus I was barefoot, and it was easy to tell I had been crying for a good 20 minutes. That was the darkest thing I had ever felt. I didn't return to that house for quite a while after that, not even to collect my things, and I will never be alone in that house again. I visit there often now, especially since their daughter Alice came to live with Jackie, but I am hesitant to go to the back of that house. I have a quick story from Jackie to tell you. She had befriended the new girl in the neighbourhood, who we'll call Girl X. According to Jackie, Girl X's boyfriend and her had recently moved into the neighbourhood. You may have already guessed it. Yes, they now live in the old shooter's apartment. Girl X's boyfriend told Girl X that he sees a man in their room, and if I remember correctly, he tells him to do things, and there was a case of their brand new Christmas lights flickering. I actually have a few theories on what this was all about. The shooter guy was haunting the neighbourhood, especially my family, since maybe the bullet disappeared in my room. Once we'd moved, he moved on to Jackie's family, since we were always over there and he couldn't follow us to our new house. My second theory is actually really dark. I believe that when you are mentally unstable, in any way, shape or form, entities love it and are attracted to it, especially because it will make you easier to control. So the event attracted the attention of a dark entity that fed off of it and stayed there, or the negative energy manifested into some dark entity. My third theory is a mixture of the first and second. I believe this because of the two male entities that felt different but connected. Let me know down below what you think about this experience. Here's something I don't like talking about, but feel as if it needs to be said. Ever since the age of 4 to around 7 years of age, I would have this reoccurring nightmare. Every time it would be exactly the same, and I'd have it nightly like clockwork. I'd close my eyes to wake up in my bedroom. Now keep in mind I shared a room with my father at the time, so you'd think I'd have felt extra safe. Even in the dream, my dad would be in his bed, before I fell asleep. The weird thing was that in every dream the room would be lit up in an ominous red colour. It always made me nervous, and I always felt like something was about to attack me, even at that young of an age. I never saw anything though, and the only thing that helped was knowing that my dad was there with me. But here's the thing about that in particular. Sometimes I'd wake up in the dream and my dad would be asleep, and sometimes he'd be awake. For some reason also, every time I woke up in bed, I would always get up and go straight to the closet that was across from my bed, and open it up to see if there was anything inside. I would then close the door and walk backwards to my bed, always too scared to look behind me to see if anything was there. Then the night of my 8th birthday came. I had a friend named Austin come over and spend the night. We did the typical things that kids do, play with toys and watch TV shows until we finally fell asleep. Now this is where it gets really crazy, so bear with me. I woke up in the night having one of my dreams, but this time the atmosphere in the room felt totally different. Like I said earlier on, the only thing that made me feel safe during those dreams was the fact that my dad was in them, whether he was awake or asleep. It always had given me an inch of hope, but this time before we had fallen asleep, my dad had passed out on the couch in the living room. The dream was doing its usual thing, so I woke up and go check the closet to see if something's there. The moment my hand touched the handle, I knew something was off. As I opened it, I saw a kid that looked just like me, but with his eyes gouged out. It looked at me directly, and I remember screaming at the top of my lungs, and my dad coming to check what was going on. Meanwhile, my friend was still fast asleep. I don't know why, but even to this day I got the feeling that that meant something. Anyway, my dad came in to check on me, and he said something like, "You okay, pal? I heard you scream." The moment my father called me pal, my heart stopped. The reason I say that is because for as long as I have known my father at the time, which wasn't that long, he had only called me by my one name, Booger. At this point I was scared as hell, and I don't know what caused me to say it, but I looked him right in the face and said, "You're not my dad." Then the whole room looked as if it was spinning and falling apart, like it was all slowly decaying right in front of my eyes. He grabbed me and pulled me close and embraced me in what felt like a spine-crushing hug. Then he started laughing in a way that was a mixture of Freddy Krueger and a small child. He put his lips straight to my ear, giving off a stench that I can only describe as a mixture of burning flesh, trash, and diarrhea. His tongue was practically inside my ear, and he said, "Oh, smart boy, eh?" He continued to laugh after saying this. My eyes grew wide, and I tried to scream as loud as I could, but nothing wanted to come out. Then suddenly these long fingernails came out of his hands. This impostor of my father proceeded to cut and slit from the top of his skull all the way down, past his crotch area, and he stepped out of my dad as if he were wearing him like a coat. The minute he stepped out, those nails grew even longer, and he stabbed me right through the shoulder above my heart. At this point I really do wake up, and I screamed at the top of my lungs for my dad to come to me. My dad showed up, and my friend woke up too, both worried about me and wondering what was going on. I told them about the dream, but here's the real kicker. Once I'd finished telling them what had happened in my dream, my dad then noticed that the back of my shirt was ripped. He looked at my back to find 4 solid slice marks as if I'd been caught by 4 blades at once. I still have the scars to this day. Those dreams went on all the way up until I was 18, when suddenly they stopped. Still to this very day though, every time I look in the mirror and look at my back, it takes me back to those dreams and many more like them. My memories of them became even more extreme, which gave me the idea of actually giving this being a name, because I never really could think of an actual name to give him, so I only ever called him Mr. P.S. Forgot to mention what his actual demon form looked like when he wasn't portraying somebody I knew. The best description I can possibly give is, think of Tobin Bell from the Saw movies, but with a bald head, pure black eyes, long fingernails, not blades or claws, but fingernails, and he was extremely anorexic. I'm shaking just thinking about it. Hear me out. It's going to sound crazy, but I just want to know if others have gone through this before. To preface this, my early childhood was filled with sexual trauma, a hard upbringing in dysfunctional family, etc. I started therapy years ago, and I'm happy to say that I'm doing well for myself, so nothing to worry about there. However, throughout the healing, and plain old coming of age, I experienced massive occurrences of déjà vu that I am curious to see if others have experienced as well. It all starts in a familiar setting of mine, Grandma's living room. Imagine a dark room, lit up only by the light that shines inward from the 12 p.m. sun rays. This setting is important, very crucial. Imagine a 20 by 30 living room, the longer side with windows and the door, and next to the windows is a staircase that leads into a dark basement room. The staircase is closed off by a waist-height black metal fencing all around the perimeter of the opening. Very dangerously designed. I was scared I'd fall in there sometimes. The people involved are only myself and my grandma. I would consider this a dream I had, though one I can never forget. It's about 12 p.m. and the entire living room seems dark blue, with plenty of indirect sunlight coming in. I'm 3 years old, and at this age is when most of the early sexual trauma happened, just for some reference. Grandma is standing next to the doorway in this dream, and her body is positioned towards the basement stairway, but she never goes down the stairway, nor opens the gate to go down. It literally looks like she'd just walked through the door, then turned left to face me. I am adjacent to her on the other side of the room, so the waist-height metal gate that surrounds the opening to the basement is between us both. This whole dream is us standing in the same spot, hand-signalling shit to each other. Mainly her hand-signalling stuff to me. I wouldn't know why she didn't talk, don't ask me. What is she hand-signalling me, you may ask? Well, that's the thing. She basically hand-signals me my whole teenage life up to now. I feel this because right now I'm having déjà vu as I write this. It hasn't happened in a while, but that's how it works. The whole dream reveals itself throughout my life, in bits, or sometimes it happens a lot. The hand signals whatever shit she does, explaining clothing or situations that will happen throughout my lifetime. Keep in mind I am 3 years old, and these things that she talked about came true when I was about 17 or so. It was similar to deja vu, but I'd known I'd seen this in a dream before. Specifically this one dream, with hand signalling my grandma. I'm rethinking about posting this. I feel like I'm crazy. I apologize if you're reading this. But yeah, Grandma basically told me what was going to happen in my lifetime through a dream of some sort. Almost all the stuff has happened, and I intuitively know it was from that dream. I have plenty of other deja vu stories like this, but in different settings and with different people. Mostly though, this all happened while I was young. And to say the least, these things discussed in the dreams all came true in a way, and has me questioning if others have experienced the same situation. It's like when these dreams happened during my young years, at all hours, they would disappear, and after the dream is over, I just go into autopilot mode, watching it all come to life. Hey fearsome friends. Well, what a world this has become, eh? I hope you and yours are all safe and well, and the isolation hasn't made you start literally tearing your hair out. I apologise for any glitches in the sound quality. I've been having PC problems and didn't want to have to record it all again. Also, don't forget to check out my Patreon. Link is in the description below. Sign up and you'll get early access to all the audio for every video that will also be available as MP3 downloads. Much love to you all. Stay safe and remember, keep being creepy.